Well, welcome. Thanks for sticking around, and no question that we're going to have a nice active panel discussion here with a lot of horsepower. Actually, I'm going to start with Mr. Duffy, and let's just talk top line, cybersecurity policy priorities, specifically in the CIO, CISO area, coming out of the White House. Paint that top level brush. Let's start with that.
That sounds good. Well, it's good to be here, Luke. Great to see everyone here. I'd say the first thing, Luke, you mentioned this. I can't speak to all the priorities that are happening right now, but I think last month we saw the president
crank down into your lane.
Cybersecurity executive order that came out that identified a few really key areas that I think all of us have been tracking as very important for the interagency, for the federal government. These are things like enhancing the way that we look at encryption standards, looking at secure software, making sure that we are using artificial intelligence to identify and manage vulnerabilities. And one that's kind of near and dear to my heart, too, is modernizing the way that we're looking at the policy mechanisms across government. Everything from those who are really deep into the policy world, like looking at Circular A130, to machine-readable policy standards that allow us to really make sure that we're making progress as a community. So all of those are kind of framing the way that we're thinking about where CIOs and CISOs need to go next. When I'm convening the Federal CISO Council, the way that I've been thinking about this is really kind of three categories. The first is on focusing our enterprise cyber defense to make sure that we're not just looking at individual agencies and how to enhance their posture as an agency, but we have to think about how individual agencies are connecting into the larger whole. I think that's kind of the theme of today's panel, and how we're looking at operational resilience, how we can make sure that we are taking deliberate steps for agencies to hook into this larger enterprise cyber defense mechanism that we built over the years. Notice I didn't say build it, I said let's focus it. Let's make good use of the investments that we've made over the years so we can harness that power. We know that adversaries kind of fit and work within the gaps. They don't respect agency boundaries that are drawn up across agencies. It's important for us to be thinking collectively. How do we make sure we leverage our authorities to do continuous threat hunting? How do we make sure we're enhancing our information sharing, et cetera, et cetera? That also means, how are we thinking about the rationalizing our cyber investment? How do we look at the tool stacks that we're using? Eliminate any kind of redundancy and duplication, focus on making this lightweight, meaningful, effective, so that we can take this enterprise approach. Second area that I've been talking about quite a bit is increasing operational resilience. That's something that is the theme, I think, of this summit today, which is timely. I personally think that we've made the right investment over the years in investing in the front half of the NIST cybersecurity framework, the identify, protect, detect. And right now, I'd like to think about how we can, in a cost-effective way, think about the latter half, respond and recover. Make sure that we've taken the time to think through the procedures, the protocols, the connectivity across agencies, so we can say we are resilient against all of the threats that we're seeing in this evolving threat environment. That's extremely important right now. Let's plan for that before the next crisis occurs. And the third area is, how do you secure a modern U.S. government? Something that's very important now is the government is thinking about how we change the way that we do business, how we leverage new technology to serve the American people better. All of this plays a role of post-quantum cryptography to artificial intelligence. And frankly, how do we make sure that we are ensuring that the privacy of American data, how we are looking at enforcing protocols to ensure that any interaction with the U.S. government to the American people is secure. Those things are extremely important. So as we work this with the cyber executive order as that framing, I've been convening CISOs to have conversations about what this means to put this action plan into progress and into action to make sure we're making progress across the board.
Appreciate that top line. Katie, let's drop down into DOD. I want to talk specifically about zero trust, full target level 2027. What does that mean? And what does that look like? How do you measure it? Are you on target?
Oh, we are on target. I will say that if you haven't met me, hi, my name's Katie Arrington, and I don't take no for an answer.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, zero trust. So, since, if anybody knows me, I've been talking about this since 2019, that the adversary isn't going to wait for us. And that, I use the analogy a lot of the times about the movie Phenomenon, the bunnies are in the farm. Our adversaries are already here in our networks. To think that they're not is ridiculous. So basing everything on the zero trust principles is the only way that we can do it. One of the areas that we highly focus on in the Department of Defense is moving everything to zero trust environments. That means DISA, that means Army, that means Air Force, you name it. We are moving at, I would say, the speed of which we are doing it is only the thing that holds us back is the amount of employees that we have to do it, to help do that. And I think we've overcome that. So absolutely have zero trust principles, blank speed, Thunderdome, you name it. We're rolling out Mission Network as a service, which is going to be a secret fabric that will be in every COCOM. That way, through ICAM, Identity Credential Access Management, working with CDAO. I don't know if any of you know Dr. Doug Matty. He's director of the CDAO now. We are absolutely working on the data labeling and tagging effort in the department to make sure all the legacy data that we've got moving into these zero trust environments is relevant. Do we need it? Is it tagged and labeled appropriately to be in a zero trust environment? So I can allow multiples in that zero trust environment, but only through the ICAM credential are you able to access that data. We need to realize that our world, globally, defend the homeland, isn't just here. It is a global presence, and we have to have that capability. But zero trust, absolutely. The PMO stood up. I couldn't be prouder of Randy Resnick and what Dave McEwen have been doing. And then if any of you are following Paul Stanton, General Stanton down in DISA, they are moving out like wildfire. And this is the rack and stack priorities. Zero trust, CMMC, SWIFT are all pieces of the puzzle, as Mr. Duffy was stating, that we have invested in, and now we're going to execute on.
And we're going to crack open CMMC and SWIFT in a minute. But let me ask Mr. Duffy, on the backside, you described zero trust, and let's talk civilian here for just a moment. And then I'm going to get Matt's perspective on this. On the backside of that, what does that look like? So toward 2024, there was a whole lot of goals that had to be met. I think the civilian agencies, if I must say, did a brilliant job of getting there, right? What does that backside look like? And is it this a full target level? Is it something different? What does that look like when one realizes that capability? And when do you think that happens? Rough time frames.
I think the way that Katie just described it is really important, that zero trust has to be a central piece of this strategy that we are implementing over time. It was really important for us to have meaningful targets, near-term targets early on for two reasons. One, because we had to demonstrate progress because we were coming out of a pretty massive cross-agency incident event that made us think this is the architecture that we need as a government. We needed to show some progress. We couldn't say, we know this takes time, we'll leave it kind of however long it takes. So having those near-term timelines, those milestones, we were able to meet those largely across government with a lot of support from our partners across the board. And that was important for two reasons. One, because we started to build that foundation of zero trust. And two, because we were able to then reflect back that this is a culture change. It's become almost cliche now to talk about zero trust as a journey, not a sprint. But if you look at that, everyone keeps asking me, well, what's next? What's the next timeline? What's the next 30 days? This is intended to be a long-term effort. We are very pleased in the way that agencies have thought about this, really been considering what it means over the long term to make these investments, to bring on capabilities, to build upon that foundation of zero trust. And we've seen that. We've seen implementation plans that came in at the end of last year. We've been working with our partners over at CISO to see how we can continue to drive progress across the board. And I'll say that right now, my focus is on how we look at zero trust as delivering in operations. How is zero trust in reality, in practice? Not looking at new ways to say, well, in theory, we think it looks like this, or that by the checklist, we're seeing this. looking at things like in the Zero Trust Maturity Model from CISA, there are cross-functional capabilities. I've been looking at those and really interested in exploring how we can measure to progress, showing that agencies can demonstrate how Zero Trust is supporting their security operations, how they are using visibility and analytics to detect adversarial activity, how we can look at how the interoperability across those Zero Trust pillars are showing actual progress and not just showing another metric. And I think that's an important place for us to be in. I think that's a positive place. We've hit the foundations. We've shown progress as an enterprise. And now's the time for us to think about what it means to mature over time, what it means to operationalize these investments and actually deliver on the commitments that we made as a cybersecurity community.
Yeah, and I just wanted to underline investment. I think that was really important, right? Once we got laser focused on top priority, we were able to put the right investments in place to realize these things and implement them. Matt, you've sort of sat on both sides of this fence, so to speak, and seen it from both perspectives. What's this look like from an industry perspective? And are the right requirements being generated? Do we have the right demand signals? Are you all as an industry prepared to sort of take it on to the next level, the backside of this, we'll call it for a moment, and help realize those? Do you understand what that means?
So the good news is the industry has a very good idea of how the government's being targeted, because we're being targeted too. The threat space isn't limited to government. And so as a large defense contractor or someone that supports anyone in that supply chain, you now have become as big a target as the Pentagon. And so the strengths of understanding how to defend yourself cascade into a lot of these conversations we have with industry, where we're leveling things to make things harder, to look at the control sets we have. And what we're seeing from the threat landscape is that there aren't as many low-hanging fruits across the enterprises that we work with, whether that be in government or out. And you start to see them going after individuals and starting to attack the identity layer. And instead of investing a lot of the adversarial capital into a single vulnerability, they start going to marketplaces to try and obfuscate how they're working so that they don't have to just rely on single tool sets, because they're less successful right now. So Zero Trust is having an impact at scale across the board. The challenge is nimbleness. To both Ms. Arrington and Mr. Duffy's points, it's difficult to pivot in the cyber enterprise landscape if you don't have a baseline set of flexible and dynamic tools. And that's what we're seeing the government investing in. They're not saying, build me something that's safe for today. They're saying, build me something that's safe for today, that has the ability to be dynamic and incorporate additional controls into the future as we see adversaries challenging our defenses. And that's where we're looking to work hand in hand with all our government and, candidly, our state and local partners to have a shared perspective of where those services are needed, and to work across the board to make sure they have the ability to share information with government so that they get those tea leaves and indicators and warnings early on as well, so we all have this shared vision and strategy of what the next generation of hardened needs to be.
And by the way, I didn't mention, we'll book about 10 minutes at the end here to make sure that we've got enough time for some good question and answers. So stay tuned for that and get those teed up. Katie, I'm going to jump back to you and talk about CMMC. You mentioned it a moment ago. How are we doing there? Is it going as intended? Big vendors, small vendors, what's that look like from where you sit at this point?
Well, I started it in 2019 and we're in 2025. So I'll say, you know what? We need to do better. She is alive. She is happening. I don't know if you saw the memo from the Secretary of Defense on Friday afternoon codifying. We are moving out on the CMMC. And I'll say one of the things.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, and more, and twice on Sunday. So here's why I say this. And I've gone out and spoken so many times about this. Your companies that work with you or for you, they're going out and telling the world on LinkedIn and everywhere else how hard the CMMC is for them. They're actually telling you that they're not doing the NIST 171, which means you are just as vulnerable as they are. The CMMC was not brought into the sphere of why, because we wanted a more, harder, bigger barrier to get into industry. It's because industry was not complying to the law. That's the full stop. We created a law in 2014. Barack Obama wrote an executive order that said the Department of Defense, the DIB, is your partner. You do not fight wars alone. And you have to be as secure as each other. If I'm not secure, you're not secure. And the weakest link in any supply chain will be the downfall. So it was an imperative, a critical security imperative to make sure that industry understood we mean business. And it's not because we want to make it harder. The problem set is if you get hit with salt typhoon, Volt typhoon, ransomware, you're not part of my network. That means I've lost a piece of my battle space, my capability. We need you. And that was the impetus of why the CMMC is going down. I will say most of our large, GDIT being one of them, they have fully complied. They went through the joint surveillance early and often. But I had in the beginning of the CMMC in 2019, I was opening up and people had POAMs to 2099. 2099. So it is happening. Now, the small businesses that are saying that it's hard, okay, I hear you. But instead of telling me tell me what in the institution of the NIST itself. Ron Ross is the godfather of the NIST 171. Tell me what requirement within the NIST is a barrier for you. Let's talk about that. Don't tell me the whole thing is too hard. And let's start breaking it, with a scalpel. And I say the large primes, you've got to look at your supply chain. You have to look at cost realism, because if you're saying that you're not doing it and you're out on LinkedIn telling your vendor, hey, CMMC is too hard, the audit is too hard, or instituting a NIST is too hard. And we are not going to back away. I am the Department of Defense CIO. I set the security standard. And you should be grateful as a nation that I'm not willing to take anything less than best, because your military, the men and women that are out defending this nation, foreign and abroad, if we are not doing the absolute best by them, look at what happened in Iran recently. If all of the companies that were in that supply chain weren't on point, 100% protected, working hand in hand with the Department of Defense, we would never have been that, I would say, demonstrate capability to show that we mean business. And peace through strength is the only thing that our civilization is ever going to be banked on. Because adversaries, if you do peace through prosperity, they're going to look for more money. And you look at what happened in Iran, and every single one of the contractors, the subcontractors on that, were locked down solid. The adversary didn't see it coming. And years of your tax dollars investment went into that. And you watched a precise hit taking out one of the most existential threats to humanity, which is Iran having a nuclear capability. And we should be proud as a nation that we did that. But remember, I'm only as good as the weakest link within the supply chain. And our adversaries are not going at the General Dynamics IT level. They're going down, they're going this way, then they're going this way, then they're going this way. So CMMC is not going anywhere. She's here to stay. Enjoy her, embrace her. Tell me how to make her better, not tell me she's too hard. She is a she, she's mine. She's my baby.
Large and in charge, you heard it from the boss.
Yes.
It's here to stay. We wanted to make sure that she had the platform to make that point. And let's face it, these collateral systems, that playbook gets run over and over, right? We saw it with OPM, we see it all the time. We know they're going after the soft tissue. Let's talk about lessons learned with, with Volt Typhoon, et cetera, right? All of these different various events that have happened over the course of the last few years, reflecting back on that. Let's start with you, Michael. What's from where you sit today, knowing all the things that we've put in place, the anticipation of things that we will be doing, the experiences that we've had from these situations, what's the lessons learned?
All the lessons learned from all of those major events. I'd say everything from what we're seeing, the need to patch more rapidly, to have true operational collaboration across industry, government, interagency.
Is that getting better? It seems like, I'll just be critical here for a minute. It seems like we keep saying the same thing when these things happen, right? And, it's it hits the fan and we're on the phone, as they say.
Yeah, I think, and that's where I mentioned that the operational resilience is one of my top priorities as I'm working with interagency CISOs because of that, making sure that we are working as quickly as possible, leveraging the technology that we have, making sure we have the right people in the right places, taking on these tasks. I think the sharing has gotten a lot better across the interagency with partners, with DOD and FedCiv, with others. I think that realization that lessons we learned of a patch comes out and time to exploit is narrowing. And we know that if something is hitting one agency or entity, it's only a matter of time before it hits something else. So let's make sure that we're sharing that information effectively and, practically speaking, how we are closing off that attack surface. All of those are lessons over time that you, to build on top of that, you're looking at the kind of living off the land type activities. You're looking at leveraging kind of a business infrastructure to evade detection. How are we looking at the tools and capabilities that we have right now? I mentioned this early on in the conversation. It's time to really rationalize our tool sets that we have. Do we have what we need for today's adversaries, for the threat environment that we're dealing with? Do we have the mechanisms in place to be able to respond fast enough? Many are saying right now with artificial intelligence, maybe not. Maybe we do need to rethink about how these mechanisms work to share information. I think what's important now, Luke, is that we are looking across the board, understanding that attack surface, and being able to, as a community, prioritize what to do first. And that is something that I think we've done effectively over the years, is say, we are seeing movement in this area. Let's take that in. Let's assess what that means for the larger interagency, and let's take action more collectively. Obviously, more work needs to be done, but that cycle of being able to see something happening in one part of government and transitioning that into a fix somewhere else is important. Now, the final thing I'll say to that is we've seen time and time again that adversaries are working on the other side of it. They are, as soon as we deploy EDR technology, they're hitting edge devices. As soon as we make progress on patching for this type of device, it's somewhere else. So they are creative, they are agile. We need to make sure that the broader enterprise cyber defense apparatus is equally agile, that we are able to adapt and change the way that we are defending because this is happening at such pace.
Matt, I'm going to ask you, you all in particular, a lot of other companies in the same situation, right? You're in the intel community doing God's work in regards to the security environment, certainly over at DOD, in the civilian areas. What's that look like as far as the gaps and the capabilities there across those three spectrums when it comes to lessons learned, and then things that we need to be doing as a community to sort of shore that up and make sure that environment, that across that ecosystem, is working as intended?
We see strengths in every bucket. And so when we look at DoD, we see the DODN and we're like, oh my gosh, the controls that they have the ability to deploy across all those nodes and all those environments, and to have that consistency and to mature as a bulk. At the same time, in the IC environment, where you're talking about a strong set of air-gapped environments that have added layers of security, then you look at the civilian population, you're like, oh, they can actually work pretty nimble and pretty quickly in certain cases to evolve some of their maturity because they don't have as much tech debt in some of these legacy systems. And so there's advantages to each. What we'd love to see is some of that to get stretched across. And so where can we learn from the DoD shared services model where you can actually take some of that security liability out of operators' hands and provide them with secure environments that actually have those in place, at the same time looking at the way the IC responds to threats and make people more resilient to some of these hard asymmetric warfare activities of nation state actors. I mean, when we're talking about Volt Typhoon, this is asymmetric warfare by a nation state. That's not somebody in their basement trying to sell you or rip you off for a few Bitcoin. This is the type of adversary that everyone's getting popped on as from the .gov, the .mil, and beyond. And there are strengths in each. What we're hoping as we evolve and mature and get some of this tech debt out of the way, that we can start to have some of these shared understandings across all those pillars to where they start to work as a cohesive unit, which is what we're seeing in the foundations being laid out. It's just there isn't a CIO for the government, no offense, that touches all of them directly in a way that can say, thou shalt all make the strengths of your shared environment stronger. And so that because of the way we've got things a little pillared, it does make it to where we have some strengths that aren't as shareable with others.
We're going to talk about interoperability in a minute, but let's talk about secure environments. Katie, you mentioned Swift. What is Swift? I heard you're going to blow something up. I'm not sure what it is, but
RMF.
yeah. So explain to everyone what this is, what you're going to blow up, and how the world's going to be better because of it.
So first and foremost, when the SecDef came in, one of the first memos he executed was the software acquisition pathway. I was a co-author of that back in the Trump 1 administration, because software is in everything. What is not software enabled, and why are we trying to cram EVM into milestones in development within software? Well, that's great, but if we don't have a way to ingest software rapidly, then we're stuck on silly again. So I'm like, oh, well, you can give me your SBOM. And generally, and JC Hertz is sitting in a prior colleague of mine. She actually taught me this. You can go and ask me for a SBOM. And what I'm going to do is take 90 days. I'm going to go back and I'm going to clean up my software and make sure it's good and the code is clean, right? How about you just do this? You give me a third-party audit and you give me what you have. We ingest that into EMAS, and I have AI and large language models on the backside to show me the deltas, and let's just talk about the deltas. If all the pre-requirements are met, okay, let's give you a provisional ATO and let's get you into the systems. The RMF process is coinciding with that, right? Which is a old, archaic way of doing things, waiting for 167 signatures to say that software is good. We need to use our capability of industry, because you guys have led this. I've interviewed virtually every large prime. Do you do continuous ATOs? Yes. Wow. How do you do it? That's what the RFI was about. So we are automating the process, continuous monitoring. We're going to be red teaming. We're going to be looking at the risk factors and more empowering the CSSP so that they're the true cyber defender that they need to be, and make sure that they have the training and the education that they need. Because an ATO, and the way we looked at it 5 years ago, is a static document. It's not real world. It's not what the network looks like today. It's not what the software looks like today. Imagine how often a patch goes out or an update, and we're dealing with these ATOs that are archaic, that are keeping innovation away from the warfighter. So software acquisition pathway, a way to ingest software quickly, rapidly going through the ATO process, going down from years to weeks, and making sure that our warfighter has the most lethal warfighting weapons they have at their fingertips. Because industry, you've shown it can be done. Now it's time for the Department of Defense to do the same.
So is this in parallel, or I guess in conjunction with just what Jen used to call software by design, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
software by design is the base core principle of software. But understand through, you made a point, Matt, about tech debt, right? And Mr. Duffy as well. I look at a lot of software companies that have bought small company B, small company A. They have ingested tech debt over decades. Unbeknownst, our adversary knew what we would be doing. So having that third-party analysis is actually a good way to look at what your company, what really is in your source code. You may not realize that, I bought this company and this company, and oh, by the way, this container was built by Huawei, and it's somehow in my stack. So it's using the tools that industry has been amazing at creating and ingesting them rapidly to use innovatively for the warfighter. I work for the Secretary of Defense, who, is lethality, readiness, and efficiency. And software-enabled everything is everything. And I've got to get it to the warfighter and into the market faster. And these are just steps that we've put into the process with safeguards like the CMMC and Secure by Design to make sure that you have and I think you said it, the culture. That is the more important thing. All of these things come together is, we looked at the Industrial Revolution as a cultural shift. We are now in a AI software-enabled cultural shift, and you have to have the cultural presence of cybersecurity and Secure by Design. It's a movement of culture. And this administration, people like Mr. Duffy, who's a great teammate to have, Matt in industry, these are teammates that are working to the same goal. And the fact that we have that very defined, we're prioritizing, we can't fix everything, but the core principles is a cultural shift that cybersecurity, cyber readiness, cyber awareness is everything. Because tell me something in your life today that doesn't have cyber. And I love the person that says love, because I've met my husband on eHarmony. The algorithm works. True fact.
Michael, talk about software design, software security by design. Maybe every 2 to 3 weeks, it seems like we hear about GSA doing another super deal with one of these vendors, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Oracle, et cetera. I'm curious to understand what kind of conversation are they having in regards to ensuring the integrity of the software? Because let's face it, there's been a couple of whoppers with some of these companies that have really exposed us from a government standpoint. Now we're doing these super deals. It seems like we have a lot of leverage in those types of situations. What's a thought process? How do you all get involved in that? Or is that discussion even happening when they're doing those deals?
It's a good question because we have seen that OneGov movement of late. And Matt, I think you said it, which is we leave a lot on the table when we aren't operating as one cohesive government. If there are silos, if there are different conversations happening across the government, it's hard for our partners to really understand where our priorities are, what we're expecting of these partnerships, and what we need from kind of that secure by design and kind of the software principles that we're working towards. I should mention that in the cyber executive order, we are very focused on the secure software lifecycle, how we're working with NIST on the SSDF. All of this plays a role that Ms. Arrington mentioned as well. One area that I think is encouraging is how we've been able to build in security by default through initiatives like CISO's Secure Cloud Business Applications effort, what they call SCUBA. It's working with big players across government and saying, let's put together what is the elevated security configuration baseline that all agencies are expected to apply across their environments. This isn't one contract for all of government in that case. This is how we apply these security controls individually, but in a cohesive way, in a way that we can say, no one forgot to click the button on a certain control, or we are missing some of the capabilities that we've procured. This is making sure that there is a secure baseline across the federal government. You saw that in a directive last year in how CISA is moving that forward. OMB has been supporting that through conversations with agencies to make sure that they have a handle on what their security posture is through these discussions, through these types of initiatives. So that's one area, Luke, that I think is important to foot stomp, is the fact that there is both the front end of having those conversations with industry. This is the expectation. Here's how we would like to see security built into our products. It's also happening retroactively to say, let's build out this secure baseline so we're all operating in a similar way. We've operationally aligned, so when we're having conversations about technology, we're seeing eye to eye on those topics.
Well, I've got a few more good questions, but I'm going to hold them because we've got a 10-minute signal here, and I want to leave enough buffer for some questions. Here's one. Wait a minute, you can't ask a question.
I'm actually curious about operational security, like, Chinese back-end IT support for our military systems.
Is that mic on it? I don't think it is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, you hear me?
There you go, yep.
So my question is about operational security, because we can assure software products all we want, but if we're getting our, IT back-end support from China for our military networks, there's an issue. How are you guys thinking about operational security for all the people that either directly or indirectly touch our systems? Because this seems to be a gap.
Can I answer that?
Fire away.
So I assume that you are hinting to the ProPublica article from last week about Microsoft and the digital export.
It seems to be a coincidence.
Yeah, a little bit. So what I would say is there's no Chinese individual sitting in the back room of any office touching my network. Full stop. That is in the contract. That has been, we have walked that dog 90 ways from Sunday. We have security protocols that even if they were to do something like that, which they're not, in my networks, on my systems, that I have security protocols in place, just like every single one of you, that would not get through. Now, does the Microsoft have other entities that they do that with? Absolutely. They're a global company, but I can rock solid assure you from the CEO down that on my networks, what is being touched, the digital escorts are either cleared U.S. defense contractors that have cleared personnel to overlook them. But that's why the SecDef put the memo out. That full stop. That is the way we work. Now, how do we get China out of our supply chains and out of our software supply chains? That's where SWIFT is coming in. And we have to ensure that and to Mike's point earlier, we have a lot of good requirements for security, but unless they're enforced, they do no good. They're only good on paper. And I can tell you, when I heard that article pop out, the first thing I did was pull out the contracts, called up the companies and said, walk me through it. Let me look at your SSP and what are you doing day to day? And we're not going to hit 100% every single day because, yet again, we're relying on industry to do the job, what they're contractually obligated to do. But I can say that without fear of where I'm sitting today, that I'm not worried that there's a Chinese operator in my aisle 5 or aisle 6 cloud on the high side doing anything. Full stop.
Please, right here in the front. Hold for the mic, though, please.
Rob Cooper of Palo Alto Networks. I guess this question is for Mike. We talk a lot about measuring deployment of tools and capabilities in the Fed Civ space. We track our investments pretty well. I think 12 billion in the 26 budget in cybersecurity spend is proposed. How are we measuring cybersecurity outcomes, and how are we holding agencies accountable for performing against those metrics?
It's a great question, and I guess it's the logical follow-on of what I've said for zero trust remaining kind of core to our cyber strategy. One of the things, as I mentioned, looking at how that interoperability across the zero trust pillars, how we make that real, how we measure operational success in deploying these capabilities. One thing that we've worked at OMB with agencies on is the concept of mean time to detect, mean time to respond, mean time to recover. Level those out, make sure that agencies have that as a metric that they are measuring progress against as they are integrating and deploying zero trust architectures across their environment with capabilities, and making deliberate steps to shorten those time periods. That's a outcome that we are working towards right now to show that zero trust isn't just a checklist, and it isn't just the initial sprint that we took several years ago, but we're actually reshaping the way that we look at security operations, at cyber defense mechanisms, all of the above. Let's find a metric and a way to measure that, and the mean time to detect, respond, and recover are really important for us.
Hi, Greg Bowman from Siemens. First, I want to thank Ms. Arrington for coming back to government. Thank God you did, because we needed your help. And I can tell you, if you get to continuous ATO, I've got my CIO willing to get a CMMC tattoo. So
Awesome. I love it.
Please get to, that is such a breath of fresh air for industry. One of the things I was curious about, though, is you and also how OMB is looking at this from the federal CISO standpoint. Are you getting information coming to you from industry? How can we do better at providing you the things we're seeing? I mean, we're always asking you, tell us what threats you're seeing, tell us how we can, impact what you need. Are you getting the same type of information from us back to you, showing where our threat vectors are coming from?
Absolutely. I can speak to that directly. There are people that, I would say one of our greatest vulnerabilities right now is open source software. That, we have to think about where we're getting the source from, right? And I get more from industry on that, when they're finding vulnerabilities in source code from open source. I mean, that's one of my main areas that I get a great deal of feedback from industry on. Other areas that industry has been really great at communicating with me, and I can speak from just myself in my office, I'm bringing in industry every day and asking them, what are the major thwacks that are happening in that I'm not doing enough to help and assist. So it's a good feedback, but the doors of the Pentagon are open. I've always had that mentality that, I work for the taxpayer. I work for you guys. We need to hear from you what's going on, what's working, what's not working. That will continue for as long as I'm around. But, I'm going to hold the bar as high as I hold it for myself as I hold it for you. But I think that's where industry really has been coming in a lot and telling me, this open source is an issue, right? How do we crack down on it? One bad line of code on an open source capability spreads like wildfire. And I think that's where we need to start thinking, because the adversary pivoted, right? When we said Huawei bad, ZTE bad, you think they went away? Do you think that they just said, oh, we'll just walk away? They have been pivoting through those networks and going through that capability. So we always have to look at the next venture. But I appreciate Simmons. You guys have been a great partner. In fact, you were part of one of our original studies on SWIFT. So we thank you.
I think we have time for one last question, and I want to give each panel member a moment to ask or give some parting thoughts over here.
Hey guys, Justin Doubleday with Federal News Network. Hey. I think I've talked to all of you. The SharePoint vulnerability. I think today NIH and NSA confirmed to have been hit. What can you all tell us just about, where we're at in the remediation and uncovering more potential impacts, and any early indications about kind of the lessons learned from this specific incident? That's for kind of Michael and Katie, but
it's going to be a Michael, right?
I'm happy to start a bit. I think, timely question.
Yes.
Luke mentioned how we are reflecting and responding to these kind of cross-government events and incidents that we're seeing. I can say it's early in the coordination process right now, but the partnerships that we've built through CISO and industry partners and the interagency coordination mechanisms that have been going on, the investments that I mentioned in technology across the enterprise have done their job. And I think that's a good place for us to be as a government, in knowing where to focus our efforts, how to communicate issues and patch information and other coordination that needs to follow on. That is happening right now as we speak. People are back at my office and other offices having these discussions. The process is moving forward in that way. I think we'll learn more kind of as far as the lessons learned, but early, it looks a lot like what I mentioned of the lessons learned already, which is patch quickly, make sure that you are fully engaged in the interagency process. You know who to call and how to leverage the capabilities and the investments that you've made over the years. We've seen that many agencies have taken those lessons and implemented them and are finding themselves in a better place because of it. Katie?
I'll just double down on that one. I think the interagency coordination has been absolutely insanely good. And the fact that we caught it early, right? We got on it. We notified everybody. We turned the lights on. Instead of trying to hide something, we put it out there. This is bad. Patch it. Stop it now. That's got to be the culture that we take. That there is no 100% guaranteed perfect system, right? But if you have secure by design principles, you work in zero trust, you make sure you have a cybersecurity culture, and you have the interagency cord, when things happen, and they will happen, we are on it and we are working together. I know that as I was walking in, I was reading emails from Greg, from your office, from the FBI. I mean, we're all involved, but things are going to happen. Our adversaries are trying everything to get at us. I mean, I think everybody needs to remember, we are the target for the world. We are not talking about Chinese espionage. We are talking about Chinese, Russian, Iranian, North Korea, all coming down on our networks. We have to be one team, one fight. And when things like this happen, we need the communication. I applaud NSA Cyber Collaboration Center. They got the patches out ASAP. The DC3 is up and live in the Department of Defense. And just being aware that we're the target of the world, folks, and bad things are going to happen. Our ability to have policies and practices in place to react to them timely and to lock them down is what's going to keep us at the bleeding edge. And we are the bleeding edge. We are the world leaders.
You know, when they were bombing the buses in London, they learned the best defense there was resiliency, right? And these things will happen. And you need to become resilient, and it's 90% of these incidents is how you respond to them. With that, we're gonna start with closing comments. Matt, with you first, please.
Just a foot stomp. The threat environment is getting nothing but noisier. The attribution is getting nothing but harder. The defenses are strengthening and becoming more dynamic, but what we're seeing is we now have great leaders in place in government that aren't taking the speed of government as an answer any further, and that we're seeing government move in a way that is dynamic and looking for acquisition vehicles, opportunities, and candidly walls to knock down that make it easier for those that are supporting warfighters or warfighters themselves to get the right tools at the right time. We are looking forward to Zero Trust for OT being fully implemented. That's that Volt Typhoon sector environment, because one of the biggest things we see with the government is their wallet. And when OT and ZT combine, that's when we can work with critical infrastructure to really get them locked in the same way. And there's a lot of investments being made there. So that's the future projection, is that operational technology landscape.
Sounds very promising, Michael.
I think my final notes is we are seeing progress. We are demonstrating progress as a community. I think that we, as I said at the beginning, this isn't about, hey, let's start looking at collective cyber defense. Let's start looking at enterprise cyber defense. Let's just make it happen. Let's build upon what we've already put forth. Let's build on the foundation of Zero Trust. Let's take advantage of cross-government initiatives and programs and the collective buying power of government, things like the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program at CISO for the federal civilian agencies, and make good use of it. Let's optimize this investment. Let's find ways to be more efficient as an interagency. Recent events have shown us that matters. That type of quick response and reaction, the coordination across the government, is making a difference. It's also allowing us to watch adversaries move their techniques, which ultimately benefits us as a nation. We can share what we're seeing across our departments and agencies and make sure that we're one step better moving forward.
Well said. Katie, take us home.
Wow, okay. It's not perfect, but damn, we're the best. And amen and hallelujah and twice on Saturday. And strong leadership matters. Clear demand signals matter. I would love Congress, and I can say this if it gets me in trouble, I would love, a 3-year budget where we didn't have a color of money and we were able to do things we need to do. And I appreciate, thank you, Congress, for reconciliation. But industry, you guys are our partners. We don't fight wars without you. We win wars with you. And that is my motto: one team, one fight. Nobody's perfect. The only guy that was has already gone back to heaven. And let's work together instead of working against each other, because this democracy, this republic, is worth fighting for. Thank you.
We have 3 patriots, 3 warriors, and 3 leaders here, and we're damn lucky that they're doing what they're doing to fight the good fight every single day to keep this country safe. Thank you all very much, and thank you all very much.
Thank you.